Big fan of this man's work and thrilled to have right here on The Rich Eisen Show. His film, Edge of the World, is available on digital and demand today. The Friendship Onion podcast is hosted by him and Billy Boyd and available wherever you get your podcasts to talk about the great Lord of the Rings trilogy that he was involved in. I was also a big fan of his for the terrific TV show Lost. Dominic Monaghan here on The Rich Eisen Show. How are you, sir?
What's happening, Rich? Lovely to speak to you.
Good to chat with you. Where have I found you? Are you driving around this great city of Los Angeles right now?
I am currently driving in Los Angeles. I'm just driving through Los Feliz Village, past the old Dresden. I'm heading to see a friend.
Okay, fantastic. I should ask you how the weather is so you could do traffic and weather together, but I know it's a beautiful day here in Los Angeles, California. So
it is.
You got that going on.
It's just starting to warm up. I have to admit, my favorite time in Los Angeles is probably December, January, February, when it rains a lot and the clouds are a little gloomy. Once it starts getting hot and sunny, it's a little too much.
So does that remind you of home when it's gloomy outside? Is that what you're saying, Dominic?
Yeah, I come from a city in the north of England called Manchester, where all the football and music comes from, and the weather there doesn't tend to get over kind of 75, 80 degrees, and it rains for probably 8 months of the year. It's glorious. So
now, Dominic Monaghan, if you were back home in Manchester about 6 weeks ago, would you have been one of those fans out there railing against the Super League? Would you have done that, Dominic?
Well, I very much protested against the European Super League on my social media channels. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to Manchester because of, the COVID restrictions and requirements. But, yeah, the European Super League would have absolutely destroyed not only English football, but it would have destroyed German, Italian, French, Dutch, all of the football leagues in Europe, as well as the Champions League, the Europa League. It would have destroyed modern-day soccer as we know it, so I was vehemently against it.
So how were you for that 48-hour period where it looked like it was actually going to happen?
I was extremely worried, especially when my team, Manchester United, were kind of at the forefront of talking about it actually happening. It wasn't as if they were saying, we're considering this and we're thinking about it. They just announced this thing is happening, and it took the players by surprise, it took the manager by surprise, and it took all the fans by surprise. So I was deeply worried and concerned. I think aside from actual physical tragedies that have taken place in soccer, like Hillsborough and the Heysel tragedy, this was probably the most seismic piece of news ever in soccer for me.
Well, as you know, spending time in the States, zipping around Los Feliz as you are doing right now, Dominic, all of us Americans, and I appreciate using the word soccer for this audience, but I appreciate... But for all the soccer fans here and seeing what was going on in the football world in that regard, it does not compute that fans railing against business interests would actually wind up with the fans winning. It's really confusing to us here in America, Dominic.
I have to admit it started out as a real awful piece of news and then ended up being a hugely positive movement because. As you say, Rich, the fans basically said, we are not going to put up with this. And they protested and they rallied and they made their voice heard. And it completely did a 180 on what the managers wanted to do. So it ended up being a fantastic story. Just to touch upon American sports for a moment, obviously I've lived in Los Angeles now for about 15 years.
Yep.
Big fan of the Lakers. I love the Dodgers. I followed Kevin Garnett for a while because I loved the way that he played, that kind of fall-away jumper that he used to shoot. I'll watch the Super Bowl. I went to the college playoffs for the basketball, the final four. I went to Arizona State University. So any big sporting event, I'm there. And American sports, they really do it well. They put a ribbon on it. They make it big and brash and exciting, and I'm here for it.
What do you mean they put a ribbon on it? What do you mean by that?
They go big. Do you know what I mean? They go big. I love the fact that, in England, we support our teams, but outside of that Saturday, there's not a massive amount going on. We get ready for that Saturday, the game's over, and it's done, and we wait for the next Saturday. But it feels like over here, in the United States, it's more of a big kind of thing. There's big parties and celebrations, and, we don't do that tailgating thing that you guys do. I love that whole tailgating community. It's brilliant. There's
no tailgating in Manchester? None at all?
No, we all drink it. we all drink in the pubs. The pubs are open, so we go to the pubs, get drunk, and then we walk to the stadium.
I'll take one last shot here on this subject matter. Have you seen Ted Lasso? Have you seen any of that, Dominic? Have you seen that?
Yes, I have seen Ted Lasso.
What do you think?
I'm actually friends with the guy called Brett Goldstein, the kind of swarthy-looking, dark bearded guy who is kind of a good player on the Ted Lasso team. He's a friend of mine. I did his podcast for a couple of times.
How real of a portrayal is Roy Kent? Dominic? How real of a portrayal is that?
It's difficult to kind of encapsulate football or soccer, as you guys call it, on screen in the same way that I think it's been problematic over the years to try and capture what competitive basketball looks like or competitive American football. I will say I think the Friday Night Lights film and TV show was superb. And, you know, there's been some other notable mentions, but for the most part, I think it's difficult to capture sport in the moment because it's so frenetic and it's so improvised, you know?
Dominic Monaghan here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's dive into your work, sir, starting with Lost. That show was so transformative for me. That first season in particular was perfect. I don't think there was a note off. When you first received a script, did you have any idea what was going to come, the smoke monsters, what they were, anything of that regard? Dominic, walk me through that.
No, we didn't know anything about smoke monsters, but and thank you for the compliment. But I will say that it was easily the best pilot script that I've ever read, like even up until this point. And it for my money, you know, I don't tend to brag about my career too much, but when people say to me, can you recommend something that you've done that I might not have seen? Sometimes I will say, have you seen Lost? And if they say, no, I missed it, and it's 6 seasons long, and I know it's not great. And I'll always say to them, look, for my money, it's one of the best first seasons of a show ever.
Agreed.
And then at times, you know, the second season, it goes in a strange direction, and maybe season 4 and 5, it might be a bit tricky. But season 1, I would put that up against The Twilight Zone. I put it up against Star Trek and The Sopranos. It's incredible.
And that's not just because you lived in Hawaii to shoot it, right, Dominic? Correct?
That's not the only reason.
That had to be something else, too. That had to be quite... I mean, you've been all over this globe shooting your films and TV shows, and that. So, why do the Friendship Onion podcast? Why dive into the Lord of the Rings trilogy again? What attracted you to that idea, Dominic?
Well, you know, the great friend that I've made in my life in this business has been Billy Boyd. I obviously have made great acquaintances and other great friends in my life, but the person that's at the top of that list is Billy Boyd. You know, we're kind of separated at birth type vibes, and we spend a huge amount of time with each other. And I just made mention to him probably about 18 months ago. I just said, look, man, these conversations that we have about what's your favorite cheese or what would you do if you were in a hot air balloon and it just kept up going higher and higher and higher. I said, if we have 2 mics running at the same time, that's a podcast. That's what people listen to. I had to get Billy up to a point to figure out that a podcast can just be people kind of aimlessly talking about nothing in particular, and then every so often fall back on the Lord of the Rings. And, you know, it seems to be doing okay. We're the #1 film and TV podcast in the world for the last 3 weeks running, so we're doing something right.
Well, I mean, it's a very popular subject matter. You got a good Ian McKellen story? What do you got for me on the set? Anything good on that
man.
one?
I mean,
what do you got?
Most of my Ian McKellen stories are kind of bordering on illegal, so I have to be careful because... You know,
Gandalf did something illegal? Gandalf did something illegal?
You know, Ian McKellen, when we were doing Lord of the Rings, Ian McKellen was 67, I was 23, and Ian McKellen was out with all of the boys until 2 or 3 in the morning, partying and having fun. So a lot of those stories kind of get vaulted. But I'll tell you a funny story. When we did this Josh Gad podcast, before it all kicked off, we were all on this Zoom call. And I had said to Ian McKellen, just happened to mention to him, I said, hey, Ian, did you ever get a poster of Lord of the Rings that was signed by the entire cast? You know how sometimes they'll do that with cast? They'll make sure that everyone gets a signed poster from everyone so you can frame it in your office.
Yep.
And Ian McKellen said, no, I never got one of those Lord of the Rings podcast posters, but he said, I've got about 300 Cats posters if you want one.
What the hell? What does that mean?
Well, you know, that movie Cats that he was in.
Oh, God, that one. He's...
Yeah. Which was an absolute turkey, you know. He's like, well, I've got 300 Cats posters if you want one of those.
Well, I mean, we had Sean Astin on the show, and I'm a Michigan Wolverine fan, so I despise Notre Dame football, and I started denigrating Rudy, the player that he portrayed in that film, and he cursed at me on live television and radio. That happened with Sean Astin. He cursed at me.
Yeah, he can get very passionate about things, Sean. You know, he believes in certain things. You know, it's been great because obviously we played a fellowship in Lord of the Rings, but we have really kind of created this fellowship brotherhood in real life. All 4 hobbits are on this message feed that's been going on for a long time. We all make sure we find out when people are in town, in Los Angeles, in London, when anyone's birthday is. We all get in touch with each other. So it's continued on, and it's a beautiful thing to be associated.
An actual fellowship of the ring, right there.
Yes, sir.
I like that. And then lastly, the Edge of the World film that is available on digital and on demand today. What do you want folks to know about this film that you are in, sir?
Edge of the World is a true story about a man called James Brooke in the 18th century who sails from England to Borneo, which is the largest island in Asia, and kind of falls in love with the island and becomes the first Raja, which is essentially a king. And then there's a lot of kind of political issues that come up, and his physical safety is at question. And I play James Brooke, played by Jonathan Rhys-Meyers. I play his kind of number one guy, his assistant, his confidant, his counsel, a guy called Crookshank. So it's a true story about a man that's kind of stuck between two worlds. It was the inspiration for the film The Man Who Would Be King, and also quite inspirational of Joseph Conrad's Hearts of Darkness. So it's a great film in an amazing part of the world that we shot just before lockdown. About a month before lockdown, we finished it.
Wow. And that's available on digital and demand today. And that's why I wanted to know about, let people know, because Edge of the World was not about the Premier League for 48 hours in the month of May. That's what you're saying, correct? That's not what it is. Who would you have portrayed in that film, Dominic? Who would you have portrayed in that film? Just a regular fan going just
what in the story of the European Super League?
Yes, exactly. What would you have played if Edge of the World was about that?
I mean, who would I like to be, or who would I? I mean, I think I would probably end up being a fan, but who would I like to be? I mean, yes. I'd like to portray someone like Juan Mata or Wayne Rooney or Ryan Giggs or Eric Cantona. I'm a diehard Manchester United fan, so any of those luminary Manchester United players, you know.
Wayne Rooney. I mean, my gosh. You must just live. I mean, I would love to watch a World Cup match with you. I would love to do that. That would be.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've got the Euros coming up in a week or so. So the Euros is obviously just like the World Cup, but it's only European countries that play. England probably are in the top 3 or 4 strongest teams on paper. They usually choke in the big competitions. We'll see how they do this time. I think, for my money, probably France are going to win it, or Belgium. But fingers crossed, England go deep in it.
Dominic, I'd love to have you on whenever you want to talk about this and other subjects. I'm a big fan, and thanks for the call. Appreciate it.
I appreciate that, Rick. That'd be great to meet you in person.
Let's do it. That's Dominic Monaghan right here on the Rich Eisen Show, Edge of the World, available on digital and demand today. You get the Friendship Onion podcast about him talking about Lord of the Rings, where all podcasts are acquired. At Dom's Wild Things on Twitter, at Dom_Monaghan_ on Instagram. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.